Well, I thought it would be good to think a bit about what's often called simply the four seals. So these are the four seals that attest to a teaching being an authentic Buddhist one, deriving from the Buddha. All causative phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena, everything which is contaminated is in the nature of suffering. Then everything is empty and selfless, and nirvana is peace. Well, I mean, if you know about these, then you can meditate on them by yourself anyway. So otherwise, I'm not sure we're really going to get through all these, but it would be good to think a bit about the first one at least. So everything, the Tibetan word tujie, so compounded phenomenon. It means something which is a product of causing conditions. And it's actually quite interesting to just reflect on the way in which things happen, not just like that by themselves, but as a result of various causes and conditions. I mean, I'm saying that, but also that's something to investigate, because there are, there have been people in the world, and probably there are people in the world that would say, and maybe you also feel, there are some things that just happen. You just can't say why, they just happen. It's kind of like random. Well, it's worth also considering that when we say, but actually that's telling, actually, when you say you can't say, what you mean is, in a way, maybe you just don't know. When you say something is happening at random, that happens at random, there's a way of saying that you don't know why it happened. And in fact, it's interesting because, we talk about like, I don't know, maybe, those gambling machines. I don't know if those are a good example because, you might think they're fixed so that you can't win. But we do talk about genuinely, like randomly generated numbers, don't we? You heard that kind of thing, right? I mean, like for example, sometimes when you register with a site, and it'll just register, it'll just generate a random code for you. If you think about it, there's nothing random about it. Random only means that you don't know what's coming, and you don't know what number it's and what code it's going to choose. So actually, going back to the slot machines, we call them slot machines, I think. Well, there might be another name we had. Penny. Anyway, one-armed bandit, actually. Yeah, used to call them that. So with good reason, actually, if you think about it. So there's nothing random about that at all. I mean, people, of course, put the money and they hope they're going to win. And supposedly it's random, but it's not random at all. It's all happens according to the laws of physics, basically. You pull the lever and it sets wheels in motion. And actually, the way that you pull it, I don't know even if they have them like that anymore. Maybe it's just buttons. But anyway, there's not actually anything random about it. It's just that you don't know. You don't know, and you couldn't guess, and probably nobody could guess. But it's not random. It's all the laws of physics, and the laws of physics don't happen at random. You see what I mean? So what I'm saying is there are some things that look like they are happening at random. Well, if you say random means there's no reason, there's no cause, then that's actually completely wrong, that one. So anyway, let's spend just a couple of minutes thinking about that. Is it right to say, do we feel comfortable with the idea that everything around us, even our own physical bodies, our minds actually, but anyways, for sure, external world, start with the external world maybe. Everything is a product of various causes and conditions. The difference between cause and conditions mainly is that when you're growing a plant, so the seed would be the main cause that's going to actually become the plant. But then you also need lots of supportive conditions for that to happen. Otherwise, it'll just remain a seed in the ground, right? You need warmth, you need moisture, you need some kind of fertilizer, nutrition. Those are the conditions, supportive conditions or cooperative conditions. So think about that. We might never have thought of it before. They're just things that if you want them to happen, you've got to create the causes for them. But then there are other things that just happen. Where they're just, random, but actually isn't it? Anyway, think about it for a few minutes. Try to think of something that seems to happen without causes. So anyway, it's good to think about this. I think it's good to think about this because really, the idea that there's so much suffering in life and it doesn't happen at random, that there are causes for this, and particularly taking responsibility yourself, if you really want to achieve deep kind of like abiding happiness, joy, peace, you have to create the causes for it, otherwise it just won't happen. And that kind of certainty is very much based on the just general understanding things don't happen unless the causes for them to happen were there, unless there were the causes, something very ordinary really, but actually the implications pretty amazing. So anything which is a product of a product comes into being depending upon various causes and conditions itself is impermanent. So impermanent, there are different types of impermanence, some which are more obvious, like like the changes of with the trees and as we go through the 4 seasons, the changes of weather, houses falling down, cars crashing, things just getting destroyed. And sometimes of course, it doesn't always mean like something bad happening. Also, the fact that things are subject to change, that they can change when you create the causes for change, means that there's hope as well, doesn't there? Things are bad, they don't have to always be bad. Find out what makes things bad and then avoid that. Find out what makes things good, apply yourself to that. So anyway, yeah, and then the most important one in a way for us is, on that very obvious level, is the fact that we have to die eventually, which is something somehow we all know, but don't really want to think about. But somehow you're cheating yourself if you don't. I think anyway. So that's also good to be aware of, because it's just I mean, from one point of view, you end up wasting your life if you just think that you're always going to be here. Eventually we all die. You keep hearing about people dying. In history, you hear about this person who was born here, there, or wherever, and did this with their life, and then they died. It always ends up with the other. They died. Of course, then there's lots of people that haven't died yet, but then you keep hearing about people dying. And each time you hear, it's like, that's going to happen to me one day. People are going to be saying, oh, did you hear? Steve died. We're going to ask for our money back. Yeah. There are actually stories of, stories. I've heard one story during our times, during my lifetime. One Tibetan monk who died while he was teaching, on the throne, teaching, died. I remember there was one also who died laughing. So whenever I would laugh, my teacher would say, "You watch out." I laughing, as that monk did. But anyway, yes, so we're all going to die, and that's actually something to. It can be. It's a sort of an awareness that can stay on the surface and not affect you. You need to kind of really think about it again and again, and sometimes even just saying it to yourself repeatedly can help. Then also, when you hear about so and so died, or maybe 20 people were killed and so on, no, don't just leave it as something that goes into the ear. Each one of those people was just like yourself. They were born, they were living their life. They didn't expect to die at that moment, but they died. So it's not just that we're going to die. Eventually, you just have no idea when. Well, at the very least, whatever your beliefs are, it would make sense if you really can see, yeah, one day I'm going to have to die. I'm not going to be here forever. To do something worthwhile with the time that you have left. Not to be just one more troublemaker in the world. Try to do something constructive, at least being friendly and helpful. At the very least, not harming others. That way, at least you can live a happy life, satisfying life. Why? Because it does help, you see, because if you think, we need money, we all need money, we need a place to live and so on, but can't take it with you. You need to keep your body healthy, but you can't take your body with you. You can't take anything with you. All you take with you is your own mind, really. And we talk about doing good things, that leaves some good imprints. Do bad things, that leaves bad imprints. So all of that goes with you. That's the only thing. So that's on a more obvious level of impermanence. There's another kind of impermanence, which is much more subtle than that, which is also very useful, very interesting to think about, which is the way in which things are constantly changing. So when they say everything which is all compounded phenomena, so everything which is produced depending on causal conditions is impermanent, what that means is it all changes moment by moment. There's never a moment when things rest. We have the impression of, on a very obvious level, things grow and then they're there for a while, then they die. Flowers, you see it growing, and then it blooms, it opens, then it fades and dies. So you have the impression that there's sort of like a period where it just stays. It's already been produced. It's not dying yet. You have that feeling. It's like that with a lot of things. like a house being built, it's being built, and then it's there, it remains, and then eventually tumbles down and dies. But actually, all that time, things never stay still for a moment, changing moment by moment. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but I think it's more or less what we already somehow know, even if we don't live it. But we know that things are changing all the time because we know that everything, what it comes down to is everything is just energy, which never stays still. I mean, in the old idea of atoms, I mean, still, of course, they accept atoms and different particles that go to make up atoms, but the old idea was it was like these little sort of balls of something or other, like the nucleus, I suppose. I can't remember what they call those things. And then with the things whizzing around it, So you had the idea of like just constant movement, right? Never staying still, not even for a moment. Not even a moment. And I don't know what the view is these days, but I know that it's just taken for granted. Everything's changing all the time, constantly changing, never remaining without changing, even for a split second. So that much is true, isn't it? You can see that. And what's not so obvious, which is kind of quite strange in a way, is that because since the moment we sat down around 6:30, since that moment up until now, we have been changing constantly. That means that the me of 6 o'clock, 6:30, sorry, I mean, also 6 o'clock, me of 6:30 no longer exists. Because that me and the me of this moment are different, right? Must be different because they're changing all the time. So change has taken place, therefore different. And so since they're different, if it still exists, then we should be able to see it, but we can't. It's not like there's two me's, the me of 6:30 and the me of now, that everybody can sit here and look at. The me of 6:30 is gone. Doesn't exist anymore. Of course, there is something like later versions and so on, but the later versions are different. The later versions can only come into existence because the older ones stop existing. So the me of 6:30 doesn't exist, and the me of 6:30 and 1 second, 2 seconds, and so on, So none of them exist anymore. The me of, so it's now nearly 7:10. So the me of 7 o'clock also doesn't exist anymore. If it does, where is it? So we always have this feeling, oh yeah, there's Steve, we saw him last week. And we even say to us, oh, you haven't changed. Things like that, we say that, right? But actually, sometimes we say it, just to be, I know, just to flatter, just to make the person happy. Oh, you're wearing your age very well. I know those nice things people say. I mean, I say them as well sometimes. You haven't changed. But also, there's actually deep down, there's a sense actually it's the same person. It's the same person. Same person as I met last year, the year before, whenever. Same person. But it's not. That person doesn't exist anymore. It's quite strange, isn't it? Quite weird. But it's a fact, isn't it? How could it be otherwise? So the me of 7 o'clock, the me of no, okay, so it must be 10 past. Yeah. So anyway, so and of course, you know, the me of the me of later moments doesn't exist because they haven't happened yet. But so really, there's just this me of this moment. But think about it. I mean, this is a little bit like the meditation on, you know, emptiness we've done before. But the me of this moment, when's that? It's almost like the moment you think of it, doesn't exist anymore. So that's quite strange, isn't it? So the person that got up this morning doesn't exist anymore. The one that had breakfast doesn't exist anymore. The one from lunchtime doesn't exist anymore. The one that went out for a walk doesn't exist anymore. I have to think about that because, you know, it's like, it's a very strong habit, isn't it? Thinking it's the same person. They say that to get so this is called subtle impermanence, and, you know, moment by moment change, constant change. And they say to get a sense of that, like to sit or stand watching a waterfall or a fast flowing river, is quite effective, quite useful. I think the idea being that there's part of you that thinks you're looking at the same waterfall for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever, but actually, you know, in a space of seconds, it's gone. And what you're looking at is something different, and there's something different. So you think it's the same river, but it's not. It's gone. So you can see, you know, particularly a fast-moving river, that, you know, waterfall. So that's like us. And in fact, one thing I find interesting about this is that even this, without talking about selflessness and emptiness, even this, you almost have a feeling, it's almost like the only me that I know is one that doesn't change. And I just don't know how to relate to a me that's changing all the time. So the one that's saying this isn't the one that said this just now. The one that said this just now is gone. Doesn't exist anymore. So even that, I think, very much helps to sort of dislodge some kind of like misconceptions that we have about ourselves. Since constantly, you know, throughout our lives, that ourselves, the people around us, and also things around us, we have this sense of like things enduring when they don't. If you think about it, you can see they don't. But how we normally relate to them when we're not thinking about it is that they do. And that kind of sense of, you know, enduring, permanence, lasting, things lasting, that undermines the awareness that it sort of blocks the awareness, the experience of, you know, being mortal, being, you know, that this life is going to end. We're going to die. So anyway, now, I mean, you know, if the whole world, how wonderful it would be if the whole world could understand that, you know, we're not here forever. So what's the point of like there's one meditation to do with bodhicitta. We're all like people on death row. So what's the point in people who are condemned to die fighting amongst themselves? Like, sheep being led to the slaughter. What's the point of fighting? Why not use the time that we have left, however long it is, to do something worthwhile? If everybody in the whole world could have that, imagine what a wonderful world it would be. It would be fantastic, wouldn't it? So anyway, we do our bit and hope that it's infectious. So anyway, just briefly try to have a bodhicitta motivation for the rest of this evening, which means this is not mainly for me. This is so that I can become a better person, better and better, to be of more service to others, to be able to serve others better. The infinite others who are all my mothers. All right. All right, so the book. Yeah, so we finished on page 50, just before the heading where it says what to do during the actual meditation session. So for the mandala offering, he says at the end of the offering, make this request numerous requests. So usually we do 3, which is numerous, arguably. But he doesn't say 3. He says numerous. So then what to do during the actual, do you ever do this? I'm trying to do something on my iPad, but I'm moving the cursor on my computer to do it, and it doesn't work. Okay, so what to do during the actual meditation session. So this has 2 points: how to practice meditation in general and how to practice this meditation in particular. So first of all, some sort of general tips on meditation. And it's interesting, when you look at it, it seems like it's sort of straight out of the teachings on cultivating, one-pointed concentration, calm abiding. So he says, meditating on a path like the one explained below is to render your mind suitable for attending to a virtuous object, just as one wishes. So, yeah, that very much sounds like calm abiding. So, in other words, the way that this whole Lamrim teaching is structured. So, I probably mentioned this at the beginning, like, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, whenever it was we started. So the structure it comes straight from Lama Atisha's Bodhipada Pradipam, the lamp of the path to enlightenment, where he talks about, there are the practices of the person, or in common with the person of small capability. Person of small capability is one who's only interested in achieving a good future life. And so what the practice that they need a practice that we also need as a foundation for the main practice, the Mahayana path. And then the person of middling capability is the person who's mainly concerned with achieving liberation, doesn't want to be born anywhere in psychic existence because they see all of it is just one big mess and they want to get out of that. So they want to achieve liberation, moksha, nirvana. And so they have their practices they need to do. Mainly it's the practice of the 3 high trainings, which means morality, then concentration and wisdom. So that's called the practice in common with the person of middling capability, the person who wants to achieve liberation, because if we want to achieve enlightenment as all sentient beings, then we also need all those practices of foundation. Then the practice of the person of great capability. So then you have the benefits of bodhicitta, generating bodhicitta. Then the 6 perfections, and so then at the very end, calm abiding and special insight, which is basically the last two perfections, are explained in more depth, and that's where you get the. I mean, you need it all the time, but when it's dealt with in the text is at the end. So it talks about how to make how to get a sort of really powerful concentration so that you can put your mind on anything that you want to for as long as you like. It could be hours on end, and not like spacing out meditation, not falling asleep, really first class concentration where your mind is very clear and alive and alert. So, Shantideva in the Bodhisattva, he says, when he gets into this subject, that, if you don't have concentration, if you don't have that kind of concentration, then everything that you do is going to be that much weaker, less effective, because your mind is so easily distracted. Anybody who's tried to concentrate would be aware of that. I did, I'll probably mention this again in however long it takes us to get to that topic. But anyway, I spent a few months. I wanted to spend 6 months originally, but I only got 4. I thought that would be better than nothing. So 4 months, doing that kind of meditation. And my big takeaway from it was, it's not easy to concentrate. It really isn't. It's amazing, actually. It's really amazing. So, when we try to do any meditation, we try to concentrate, right? Try not to be distracted when it's just normal, right? But when you're trying to, and that it's difficult to, you do get distracted, that it's not that unusual. Whereas anyway, maybe not that usual, but anyway, it can easily happen. You sit down to meditate, you get distracted, you think about something else, and you end up, next thing you know, you're making yourself a cup of coffee. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be meditating. But anyway, it's very easy to get distracted, and you think about all sorts of other things. And that's just with, it's even more obvious when you try to do single-pointed concentration, because it's difficult to focus your mind literally for more than a second. If you can concentrate without being distracted at all, even for a few seconds, then you can pat yourself on the back. It's a question of building on that. But anyway, so and the reason for that is, I mean, it's useful in general. If right now we had it, it would be fantastic. All of our meditations would go so much more powerful. But the main thing is, you see, because that you have to have that in order to have a special insight. So without going into detail, not that I could go into that much detail anyway, with the special insight, what you're doing is you've got your calm abiding, and you use that for analyzing and coming to, you apply that to emptiness. And the purpose of that is that when we talk about on the level of the mind, what it is why is that we're not enlightened at the moment? It's because we're obscured. We have obscurations. What cuts through those obscurations, like to put it simply, the grasping attachment and jealousy and anger and ignorance. So all of those obscure the mind from being able to see really clearly. And when you can see really clearly, like as an enlightened being, then you're really very well placed to help others, even without talking about supernatural powers and so on like that. Your mind is so clear at all times that, and so uncluttered by those mental afflictions, and especially by self-cherishing, selfish, just thinking oneself kind of thing. You can really focus on others and their needs without being cluttered by your own sort of grasping. So you're just naturally much more effective in helping others. You can help others much better. So really, that's the whole of the path is really aimed at that. It's all aimed at that, at achieving a meditation where your mind is one-pointed and you have a perfect understanding of the nature of reality. And that understanding, that wisdom, especially when you keep cultivating that until it becomes a direct perception, that actually starts cutting through those obscurations in the mind so that they would never come back again. And you keep going with that, so we talk about the 10 bodhisattva grounds, a bit 10 bodhisattva levels. So anyway, you progress gradually through those. And then, at the end of the 10th one, you're enlightened. And it couldn't happen just because of that wisdom, because of that realization of emptiness. It would only work if that's combined with bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion. But what actually cuts through those obscurations, those veils, as they call them sometimes, is that wisdom. So that's why he says here, meditation on a path like the one explained below. So, he's going to go through the precious human rebirth, death, then what? Death, lower realms, refuge, karma, and so on. And then through all the meditations for in common with the person of middling capacity, and then bodhicitta and all that. All of that is so that eventually you're going to be able to focus your mind in that way. Because all of the things you're doing in between times, they're very important, they're very precious, they're very valuable, but mainly because they're carrying you towards that kind of insight that's actually going to get you enlightened. It's amazing when you think about it. So that's, I think, that's what he means, and why he's giving this kind of advice, as we see when we go through this paragraph, even now, is because, it's not like you start trying to develop concentration, a few years from now, when you've got all the other experience, and now you've got to the calm abiding. So, you're just trying to do calm abiding. Right from now, you try to focus as well as you can and use that kind of advice. So meditation on a path like the one explained below is to render the mind suitable for attending to a virtuous object just as one wishes. In other words, it's to make the mind, all of the path that's coming up is aimed ultimately at being able to make the mind able to focus on any object that you wish. If you jump from object to object to sustain your interest, or you pursue a variety of virtuous objects in no particular order, nothing will come of it. Having gone wrong from the beginning, your spiritual practice will continue to be faulty throughout your life. I mean, I think the basic idea is, if you don't do it right now, and you just keep doing it the same following the same bad habit. So the bad habit is going to get stronger, and you're just going to keep doing the same thing. So it's like you're going to, your meditation is going to be wrong today, and then it'll be wrong tomorrow, and it'll just be, like, so your whole life would go by past like that. But of course, that's not like something that's, what am I going to do? Maybe that's going to happen to me. If you keep learning and trying out this kind of advice that he's giving here, then that won't happen. So he's giving the advice that will make sure that your meditation and then your practice and your life will keep going forwards. And that's what that is all about. So therefore you should first determine a number and order of objects to be attended to be meditated on, in other words. So what that means is, it might mean all sorts of things, but it's like, I don't know, maybe like, for example, meditating on bodhicitta, there's what they call the 7-step instruction, 7-step, cause and effect instruction, they call it. So, 7 meditations to go through, the build one on the other. And so you do need those 7. You need those 7 steps. Not 8, not 10, not 2. You need 7. And there's a particular order. And I've come across, I did meet somebody who was saying, no, they didn't like the idea that there was a particular way you had to do it. They wanted to be fruit. No, that's like human right to choose the order in which you do your meditation or something. And of course, you're welcome to try that. But what he's saying is that, I suppose what he's implying is, these are tried and tested ways and they work. And so if you follow that, so there's a particular set of meditations to do, and there's a particular order. And if you do it like that, things are going to go well. And if you don't, you're going to be in a mess. It's not going to work. People have tried it and it didn't work. Okay, so therefore you should first determine the number and order of objects to be meditated on. Then you should unleash, funny word he uses, a strong resolve that does not permit the advent of thoughts that draw you away from what has been ascertained. So what this is talking about is, and this is something very, very useful, actually. It's very useful advice. When you sit down to meditate, part of your motivation, I guess you say, I'm sure we've talked about this before. Often when we think of motivation, we get the idea what it means is, like why you're doing it. In other words, so, I must achieve enlightenment. You feel like it means thinking to yourself, I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, therefore I'm going to do this meditation, something along those lines, right? But it's more than that. The Tibetan word gunlong is more than that. It's to do your approach, your sort of like, in the mind, your approach, your attitude to what you're going to be doing. So part of your motivation, if you like, anyway, it's like I say, gunlong, your overall attitude, kind of mentality, attitude that you have towards your meditation, the meditation you're about to do. One component is make a strong decision. I'm not going to be distracted. And you won't believe how much that actually helps. You make a strong determination not to be distracted. That determination not to be distracted actually makes a difference to how your meditation is going to go. Particularly when you're doing, this one-pointed concentration, making that decision at the beginning of each session, whether it's a very short session or a long session, depending on where you are with that kind of practice. I shall not allow myself to be distracted for 1 minute or maybe for 5 minutes. I'm going to meditate that long, and I will not allow myself to be distracted. It's very, very powerful, that kind of that decision. So strong resolve so it's a strong resolve not to allow any other thoughts to distract you away from your object. And when it says ascertained, this could mean either of two things, I think. So ascertained in the sense that, I mean, sometimes we meditate in order to understand something, don't we? I mean, that's, of course, that's natural. But there's when they talk about mindfulness, meditating on something with mindfulness, what's implied actually, with concentration, mindfulness, and all that, what's implied is that actually you're furthering your experience and familiarity with something that you've already understood. Part of the definition of mindfulness is that it's an object that you're already familiar with, that you already know. So you've already ascertained it. You've already gained certainty about it. So what has been ascertained means your meditation object that you have already got a good understanding of. But of course, it doesn't have to be that. Yeah, and then the other possible meaning would be that not switching objects. So that would be particularly relevant when you're trying to cultivate calm abiding shamatha. When your concentrations become very strong, very firm, they say, then it doesn't matter, it doesn't harm your development of concentration if you switch objects. But in the beginning, if you keep switching objects, let's say you decide you're going to develop concentration by focusing your mind on the Buddha in front of you, Buddha Shakyamuni in front of you, whatever, then you shouldn't switch objects. Like you've decided that up to a certain stage when it's okay to change, that you're going to develop concentration on that object, the Buddha Shakyamuni in front of you. And so you don't switch to another deity or to another object or to a letter inside your heart or something like that. You don't do that, because it will weaken your concentration. It will work against the development of concentration. Because I think it's because it's just too much like being distracted. Of course, if you spend your whole meditation in distraction, then how's that going to help you build up concentration, right? So it's too much like being distracted. Switching objects is like being distracted. So it's just, it's counterproductive. Finally, you should sustain, by which I think, that's a term. It's a funny word in the Tibetan, actually, in this. So he's chosen sustain, but what it means is practice, really. Finally, you should practice with mindfulness and vigilance what has been ascertained. So mindfulness means, keeping the object in mind, not forgetting it. And vigilance is what they call the mental spy, that's watching to see how the meditation is going. And then when that spy notices that you're getting a bit drowsy or getting distracted, then it's like it calls in the antidote. Yeah, without addition or omission. So again, like if there's 7 points, don't add points on top of it and don't take points away. Yeah. So then how to practice this meditation in particular. Let's see. Oh, that's good. We're doing well. So so there's an I don't think anybody else is going to come along, so I'll do this while I think of it. I shall put this in the chat because just in case. Oh, let's try this. just in case somebody came along later. Okay, so we sorted out so it's the same thing that oh no, that was a direct message to Michael, sorry. Yeah, we sorted out when the next block of classes is going to be. So there's the link. Okay, so so now we should be able to get to the end of this evening, and then we'll carry on with. There's a lot of advice on how to make the period in between sessions. Yeah, especially, well, anyway, to make it so that that time in between sessions is helpful for your meditation. So first, so how to practice this meditation in particular? No, did I skip? Oh yeah, how to practice this meditation in particular. That means, actually, you would never guess, but what he means is that how to practice what he's been explaining is the topic of, you know, how to relate to, you know, your virtuous friend, or, you know, guru, or Kalyana Mitra, which is a nice Sanskrit word for that, Kalyana Mitra, Gyeri Shinyan. So he's been talking about that, and now he's been explaining how to do a meditation session on that. So of course, everything we've done up until now during this chapter is actually applicable to any meditation. But now he's coming specifically, you know, coming back to the particular topic that he has been explaining. So what you would do in the meditation session, having done, you know, the 7 in prayer and all that, the mandala offering and requests and so on, then, you know, strong determination not to be distracted and all that. First, contemplate the benefits of reliance and the faults of non-reliance. So that was explained before. I don't think, it's not like in Pabonka Rinpoche's, Pabonka Dechen Yimpo's liberation in the palm of your hand, or liberation in your hand. He doesn't go through it in such detail as Pabonka Rinpoche, but he did talk about it a bit. So he says, and you can supplement this meditation with you know, the teachings in liberation, which is really excellent level of teaching. So first of all, you would think about the benefits. So by meditating on the benefits, then it's like, wow, I really want to do this. That's the result of meditating, and the point of meditating on the benefits. Then the faults of non-reliance, that's mainly talking about what you would miss out on if you didn't have that kind of practice, you know, like that kind of connection with a guru. And what happens, you know, if you give them up, you know, like for whatever reason, you start disliking them or scorning them or that kind of thing, criticizing. So so then you would think, oh, so I'm going to have to be very careful. I'll be careful. And in fact, he explains a bit about what that would lead you to. Then repeatedly resolve to never permit your awareness to get caught up in conceiving faults in the guru. So he says conceiving faults is to do with not dwelling on their faults. Suppose they have faults, or you've seen something that looks like it's a fault, not dwelling on it. And in a way, some of the teachings on how to relate to a guru are sort of useful. They're kind of like things that you would need for relating to anybody. But of course, in the case of the guru, then you want to be, you know, really careful, so it's emphasized there. But so, I mean, whether it's a partner or a friend, I mean, nobody's perfect. So, we make mistakes, we do things, the famous one, not putting the the cap on the toothpaste, that kind of thing, So like one of you never puts it on and never thinks about it. And the other one is like, drives you nuts, that kind of thing. But of course, that's just a joke. I mean, but actually people do get upset with that kind of thing, actual fact. One's messy, one's tidy, but it can also be like that with your friends. So anyway, you might imagine faults. There might actually be faults, but you don't dwell on them, right? This does not, what do you call it? This doesn't define the person. So you see that it's that kind of thing. So again here, with you might see your teacher doing something you feel is wrong. Actually, there could be a good reason for doing it, and even if there isn't, all things considered, just there's no point dwelling on it. All that does is it'll eat you up and undermine relationship. You get less out of it. It's just, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. So that's just anyway, just a bit of an idea. And instead recall the excellent qualities. Yeah, so focus on the good things of the person. It doesn't mean say you can't say something, but that's the main thing. Don't sort of get, don't sort of like allow the sort of the faults to fester in your mind. So it becomes like irritation, turns into anger, turns into hatred, turns into, bye-bye, I'm off. And then, thinking about the excellent qualities, like their practice of morality, concentration that you yourself have perceived in them. I'm sure I already said before, but most of the time, it doesn't say him or her in the Tibetan. I don't know why. That's how Tibetan works. You can define, male, female, but a lot of the time it doesn't say anything. I can actually the stage of the path prayer that we read out at the beginning of the class. So that one, they've actually taken on board the insight that in the Tibetan it doesn't say he. Most translators say he. They talk about the Guru, they say he, but it doesn't say he in the Tibetan. It doesn't say he. It doesn't say she. So anyway, a lot of translators still do say he when they, it doesn't actually specify in the Tibetan. And why would it? Have perceived in them. Cultivate the faith that has the aspect of mental clarity until it arises. So keep thinking of without being distracted to any kind of faults that you might have imagined or that you might have noticed. And instead, focus on the excellent qualities. And then the more you think about that, the more this kind of like mind of the faith arises. Faith based on the knowledge of the qualities of this person. And then contemplating the accordance. So then the next thing, so you meditate on faith, and it's what they call respect. But respect means appreciation of kindness, and it's not so. And it's obvious actually, because what he says is then contemplate in accordance with the above quotations from the sutras. Above means like way above. When he was explaining this topic, a couple of chapters back, or maybe the chapter before, I don't know. The instances of beneficial kindness that you've received and will receive. He says still receive. It looks to me more like will receive. Have received already and will receive in the future. And then where he is, and from the depths of your heart, cultivate respect until it arises. I think I would put it like this. And will receive and meditate until respect arises in the depths of your heart. So keep meditating until you have this heartfelt respect. But what does that respect mean? It means an appreciation of kindness. Yeah, that's what it means. So then what to do at the, I'm just trying to do the cursor again. So what to do at the end? So how much we got? 10 minutes. Just try, actually. Because, yeah, so what to do at the end? By means of the prayer of good conduct. So the prayer of good conduct, that's what we usually call the king of prayers, right? The king of prayers. I mean, it's called as in the Tibetan they call it Zangche Mulam. So that's literally, it's the prayer of good conduct. Part of the name of the title might be actually this prayer, the prayer of good conduct, is amongst all prayers. It's like the king of prayers, the most important one, the most amazing one. So that's why we call it the king of prayers. Actually, it's the prayer of good conduct. Now, I wanted to say something about this from. I mean, does everybody know this prayer? The prayer of the king of prayers. Yeah. Okay, good. So you might find this interesting. You might think, but anyway, you might find this interesting. So this is something that comes up in the it comes up in the Madhyamaka-Vatara, Chantikiti's Madhyamaka-Vatara, but particularly, Lama Tsongkhapa in his commentary to that, which I'm involved with translating and stuff for the center in Singapore. So he says some very nice things about this. So without picking up the book, I made 1 or 2 notes, but he also, but the Kobun Kenrinpoche, he also added something to that, which is, I thought it's kind of amazing. Sometimes with the numbers in the Tibetan system, it's kind of like, sort of like a bit overwhelming. But anyway, it's so we know what the first ground is, right? The first bodhisattva ground. When a bodhisattva achieves a direct, like non-conceptual realization of emptiness, then they become an Arya Bodhisattva, and that the period from becoming an Arya Bodhisattva, when you first become an Arya Bodhisattva, up until enlightenment, is divided up into 10 grounds for various reasons. So the Bodhisattva on the first ground, which is called the very joyous. Sounds pretty amazing anyway. I mean, I can remember from years ago, they say that hearing this, that Bodhisattva on the first ground experiences more kind of like joy in the mind just by hearing somebody at their door, like a beggar at the door, than an arhat in their meditation, their experience of nirvana completely beyond samsara, right? More kind of like bliss and joy in the mind, just at the thought that they're going to have an opportunity to give. Can you imagine that? So that's, so that's one of the things. So the Bodhisattva on the first ground, so it talks about how many prayers they make. So they make many, many prayers. How many prayers they make? Actually, the way the number comes out is always kind of quite entertaining. So it's 100,000 times countless times 10. Well, the thing is, this word countless is actually a number. When you first hear, like, oh, the Buddha practiced for 3 countless great eons. So like 1 countless great eon would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to countless, like countless months. Actually, it's a number. And actually, the number is 10 to the 59. I know it's kind of weird, isn't it, that to hear it expressed in this number. But it's kind of like just an overwhelmingly huge number of prayers that they make, prayers of dedication, you know. Might be aspirational prayers, might be dedication prayers, but anyway, here it's mainly, you know, from the point of view of the dedication. So, in other words, so basically 1,000,000 times 10 to the 59. So 1,000,000 is 10 to the 6. So it would be 10 to the 65, 10 to the power of 65 prayers. Okay, so anyway, huge number of prayers, right? Main point is huge number of prayers, and all of those prayers, well, obviously, what do you call it? Implicitly somehow. The meaning of all those prayers are included in the King of Prayers. So basically, all of those prayers are included in the King of Prayers. That's why so much emphasis is put on the King of Prayers. And I heard recently that somebody told me that His Holiness had advised Lama Zopa Rinpoche to recite it every day. So at midnight, he stops everything and recites it. When you've got it memorized, especially in Tibetan, it probably takes about 5 minutes. I mean, actually, even when we read it out in English, which is always much slower, it takes, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. So it wouldn't surprise me if it would only take about 5 minutes if you're, you know, if you've got it memorized in the Tibetan. Tibetan's much easier. When we did a Gui Samaj retreat here, not Tibetan, but I mean Chinese. So some of them were doing it in Chinese, and the Chinese, you know, the people who were doing it in Chinese, at least some of them, they could make the comparison. So they knew that everything that was in the English was also in the Chinese. It's not like it was like half it was cut out or something like that. Half it was missing. They would finish in half the time. I think they would finish like an hour before us. So anyway, that's just by the way. So all of those prayers that the Bodhisattva makes on the first ground are included in the King of Prayers. And so this is going to really, this is really amazing. All of the King of Prayers is included in 2 verses in the King of Prayers, which are, now I'm going to have to look for it because I thought I had it here just now. Because if I just say Jambel Bao, you won't know what I mean. I don't think. There's a prayer called Jambel Bao. Let's find the King of Prayers. Oops. We're not going to go over. Not really, I don't think. I just have to do this. Where is it? King of Prayers somewhere. King of Prayers. So it should be it's towards the end of the King of Prayers. Yeah, okay, there they are. So it's like from the bottom, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 prayers up from 9 verses up from the bottom of the King of Prayers. So it says, in order to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality as it is, and just like Samantabhadra as well, I completely dedicate all this goodness just as they did. So that verse, Khenpo Rinpoche was telling us, that's what they call that, and I'd never heard this before, that's called the Bodhisattva's prayer. It's called the Bodhisattva's prayer because that includes all of the prayers of the Bodhisattva. And I kind of get how this works in a way, which is if you were to say, besides using an analogy, I want to get that analogy as well. So, you know, if you were to say, I dedicate all of, you know, whatever you're going to dedicate, I dedicate it all to His Holiness's prayers being, you know, taught to his prayers, same dedication as him. Whatever he dedicates for, you know, I dedicate to him. Then you can imagine, you know, His Holiness's prayers and dedications, there's nothing left out. So it's like a way of dedicating so you don't leave anything out. And that's what these things are doing. So this is what, so this, when you say in order to train, I always find these words awkward, but really what it's saying is, you know, you've got Manjushri, you've got Samantabhadra, these incredible, you know, famous bodhisattvas. So their prayers like the Bodhisattva prayers, you know, the main. But anyway, the Bodhisattva prayers are all included in here. And then with that dedication, which is praised as greatest by all the Buddhas, gone to freedom in 3 times, I too dedicate all my roots of goodness for the attainment of the Bodhisattva practice. So that's called the Tathagata prayer. In other words, the Tathagata means Buddha, right? So anyway, the Buddha's prayer. So all the Buddha's prayers are included in that. And how it works is really very, yeah, actually the example my teachers give, it's just, well, I'll tell you that because you know, there's a reason why they always use this example. You know, they always tell us the story of this guy that goes to the main temple in Lhasa, and in front of him, so he doesn't know anything, but the woman in front of him is making all of these amazing, you know, elaborate dedications. When it comes to his turn to make prayers, he says, "I dedicate just like that." So it's like that. But how does that work? I think how that works is very simple, actually. It's like, so I go into a Chinese restaurant, and all of the dishes are in Chinese, and even if they're in English, I don't understand what they are. So I've got, you know, maybe I'm sitting there with a friend, and I just say whatever she's having, whatever he's having, right? So I've got no idea what they've ordered, but because I said whatever he's having, that's what I get. So it works. So it's just like that, you know. I dedicate all of this just like all the Bodhisattvas, just like all the Buddhas. And it works. It works. There's no reason why it wouldn't work. Okay, so let's just finish off that paragraph. So yeah, by means of the prayer and good conduct, the King of Prayers, and the aspiration in 70 verses, the virtue accumulated should be dedicated with strong aspiration to temporary and ultimate aims. You should meditate like this in 4 sessions. So if you're doing retreat, they usually say do it in 4 sessions. When it says at dawn, don't get that mixed up with sunrise. So usually they say don't meditate at sunrise, don't meditate at noon, nor as the sun's going down. I don't think they say anything about midnight, but I can't remember. So anyway, so 1 before dawn. Sometimes you can't follow this advice because, you know, in certain, I mean, like in England, in the winter, you know, it's just days short. Or if you go to the north of England, especially or up into the Shetland Islands, you know, if you've got like, you'd have to do 2 sessions in 3 hours, and then you've got like 21 hours to do your other 2 sessions. So, you know, you can't always. But anyway, 1 before dawn. This would work very well in a place like India, where the day length of the day is almost the same all through the year, and it's, you know, 12 hours more or less. 1 before dawn, then 1 between dawn and midday, then 1 after midday and before, you know, the sun's gone down, and then 1 after the sun's gone down. If your sessions are too long in the beginning, so this is very much like the shamatha advice. If your sessions are long in the beginning, it is easy to fall under the power of laxity and excitement. So you might think that you should have long sessions, but if you do, you'll probably end up wasting most of the time. It'll be long sessions, but not very good quality. Much better to have short sessions, good quality. And then anyway, let's read through to the end of this paragraph, and you'll see why. Since it's difficult to correct this state of mind, once it's become a habit, you should have many short sessions. They even say, you know, 18 sessions. But I think that what that means is not necessarily getting up, you know, like sitting down for 5 minutes, getting up, walking around, have a break, you know, come back, you know, do all of these different practices and so on. But it could be, you know, 4 sessions where maybe, you know, you meditate for 5 minutes, then you sort of like relax a bit. Might be for a few minutes, whatever, you know. Then you try it, then you do, when you're feeling refreshed again, you know, you really feel like doing another session, you do another 5 minutes. It could even be 3 minutes, it could be 2 minutes. The main thing is you have to make the judgment that whether it's good quality or not. You might feel like you know, I have to do longer now. I've got to start doing longer. And then you find that it's just rubbish. The meditation is rubbish. So you have to pull yourself back again. Almost you have to start all over again. So it's very important to have short sessions. And he explains why. If you cut the session short when there is still a desire to meditate, you will be drawn to entering meditation subsequently. In other words, if you finish the meditation, when you don't really feel like finishing it, you feel like you would like to carry on, then when you get up, you're going to want to go back again. Otherwise, they say you will be overcome by nausea at the sight of your meditation seat. If you do too long sessions, you'll be sick of the sight of your cushion, and you might even just give up the meditating. So that's really very important. Once your meditations have stabilized a bit, then you can gradually prolong them while still being free from the faults of excessive tension or slackness. Where does this tension come from? Oh, I think, I know what this is, yeah. In other words, this must be when he's talking about excessive tension or slackness. Your concentration, the focus, has to be not too tight and not too loose. If it's too tight, it won't work. If it's too loose, it won't work. And so they say, it's just like tuning a guitar or playing a guitar. Anyways, they say tuning a guitar. Also, like, they sometimes I've seen a teacher, like, you can't even see my hand, can you? So, and I haven't got a mala. Where's my mala? Anyway, so if you've got a mala, your rosary, if you hold it too tight, you can't, you can't do anything. If you hold it too loose, you drop it. So there's just the right amount of tightness and looseness. So like that. If you practice in this way, you will have few obstacles and exhaustion. You won't get tired. You won't get too tired. You won't have the laxity and lethargy and all that will be. So anyway, various things that can damage your meditation, harm your meditation, you'll have less of those, easier to handle. Okay, so we stop there. What to do in the period between sessions. There's loads on that. Okay, so if you dedicate, I'm going to dedicate using these two verses. You might have it, but otherwise just listen carefully and dedicate just like I'm saying. So all of the virtue of the past, present, future of myself and others. Oh, look at that. Michael's actually found it, but I can't read it. I can read mine. I bet the translation is different as well. I wouldn't be surprised. In order to train just like, oh yeah, it looks like the same. So all of the merit that we created this evening and during this whole course, and also all the merit of ourselves and others we ever have created, are, and ever will, okay, because of all that. So we're dedicating all that. What we're dedicating is all that. How we're dedicating it is in order to train just like the hero Manjushri, who knows reality as it is, and just like Samantabhadra as well, I completely dedicate all this goodness just as they did. So that's the main thing, really. I completely dedicate all of this just like them. With that dedication, which is praised as greatest by all the Buddhas gone to freedom in the 3 times, I too dedicate all my roots of goodness for the attainments of the Bodhisattva practice. Oh, that's interesting, because actually I was thinking that verse is meant to be the Tathagata dedication, but then talks about Bodhisattva. But in the Tibetan, it doesn't say that. So you're dedicating it towards the good, the Samantabhadra practice, good, or the good conduct. In other words, the practice of the it means Bodhisattva conduct, but anyway. Oh well. Anyway. So yeah, so if you look at the so Priscilla, you're welcome. So anyway, the next one will be, I think, let me have a quick look. If you go to the link, then you'll be able to see when it carries on again. I'm not advertising. I'm just saying, you know. So it is, the next one will be on the 17th of November. Break for Thanksgiving and then carry on. 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, finishing on the 22nd of December. Okay. To see everybody.
Hey, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Venerable, for teaching us. It's awesome.
Thank you,
Class.
Venerable Steve. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, you're
Thank you so very much.
welcome. Thank you, everybody, of course, as well.